I rushed out of the hospital, the smell of disinfectant still clinging to my clothes and the weight of the day pressing on my shoulders. My scrubs felt stiff, and my feet ached from 12 hours of running between patients who barely remembered my name. Working as a nurse in a small-town Austin clinic was supposed to feel meaningful, but lately it felt like I was being drained dry, piece by piece. It was late, so late that the last bus home had already gone. The autumn air was damp and cool, and every breath made me shiver. I pulled my thin jacket tighter and headed toward the old metro station, thinking about nothing except getting home, showering, and collapsing into bed. That's when I saw him. A man stood near the bottom of the stairs, leaning against the graffiti-stained wall, a paper cup trembling in his hand. His clothes were torn and grimy, his hair matted under a worn cap, and his eyes, they looked hollow. People streamed past him as if he didn't exist. For a second, I thought about doing the same. I was tired, emotionally numb, and my life already felt heavy enough. But then he looked up and our eyes met. Something about his face stopped me cold. Sharp cheekbones under all that dirt, eyes a stormy gray I had seen before. For a wild second, I thought he might be someone I used to know, someone who once mattered. I even whispered under my breath, Anton. But then I shook my head. No, this wasn't Anton. Still, something in me shifted. Maybe it was because I grew up poor myself with a mother who worked 2 jobs just so I could have shoes that fit. Maybe it was because I knew what it was like to feel invisible. I walked over and handed him the hot coffee and sandwich I had grabbed earlier for myself. He blinked at me, as if kindness was some foreign language. "You sure?" he asked, voice rough from cold nights and hunger. "Yeah, I'm sure," I said softly. "When's the last time you had something warm to eat?" He shrugged, embarrassed. "Yesterday, maybe." I sat down on the bench next to him, surprising even myself. We talked, just simple things at first. His name was Luke. Life hadn't been kind lately, and no, he wasn't on drugs. He'd lost his documents, had no family he could count on, and had been bouncing from one random spot to another just to survive. I don't know what came over me, but looking at him, I didn't see a stranger. I saw someone who'd been shoved off track, someone who'd been judged and dismissed too many times. And then, in a burst of impulsiveness I still can't fully explain, I said, "Come home with me tonight." Luke froze. "What?" "Just come home with me. You need a shower, a meal, and a safe place to sleep." "I'm serious." He hesitated, studying my face, probably expecting a catch. "Why would you do that for me?" I smiled faintly. "Because I'm tired of walking past people like you as if you don't exist. And because maybe I need this as much as you do." And that's how it all started. By the time we reached my apartment complex, my heart was pounding, not from fear of Luke, but from what I was about to do. I had never done anything like this before. My life was usually so predictable, so safe. But tonight, for reasons I couldn't quite explain, I wanted to throw caution out the window. "Just one thing," I said as we climbed the stairs. "My mom lives with me. She's protective. I'm going to tell her you're my fiancé, so she doesn't freak out. Just go with it, okay?" Luke stopped in his tracks. "You're what?" "My fiancé," I repeated, trying to sound casual even though my cheeks were burning. "It's temporary. You'll have a meal, a shower, a warm place to sleep, and if you don't like it, you can leave in the morning. But I need you to play along." He let out a soft, humorless laugh. "You're kidding." "I'm not. Please, I just need you to trust me tonight." He stared at me for a long moment, then shrugged. "Fine, but you owe me an explanation later." I nodded, my stomach tightening. I already knew my mom would hate this. The door swung open before I could even knock. My mom, Patricia, stood there in her robe, holding a cup of chamomile tea. She was petite but tough, the kind of woman life had hardened. Her eyes immediately locked onto Luke, his ragged jacket, the torn jeans, the dirt under his nails. Her jaw tightened. "Haley, who is this?" I forced a smile I didn't feel. "Mom, this is Luke. My fiancé." The cup nearly slipped from her hand. "You're what?" she snapped. "My fiancé. We've been seeing each other for a while, and I thought it was time you two met." I could feel Luke shifting uncomfortably behind me, his eyes glued to the floor. Patricia's voice rose. "Are you out of your mind? You bring home a stranger in the middle of the night and tell me he's your fiancé? Haley, do you know what you're doing?" I crossed my arms, defensive. "Yes, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm making my own choices, Mom. You've spent years telling me who to date, who to marry, and none of them ever felt right. Luke is my choice." Her face turned pale, then red. "Your choice? Haley, look at him. He's homeless." Luke finally looked up, pain flashing in his eyes. "Ma'am, I don't want trouble. I just needed a place to stay," she offered, "and I didn't mean to cause any. Enough." I cut him off, hating the humiliation on his face. "Mom, he's staying tonight. End of discussion." Patricia stared at me like I'd lost my mind, then muttered under her breath and stormed off to her room, slamming the door. I turned to Luke, my face hot with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, she's not usually this bad." He gave a small, tired smile. "I've heard worse." Still, as I handed him a towel and pointed him toward the bathroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight had just lit a fuse. The next morning, I half expected Luke to be gone, vanished with my spare blanket and maybe a few kitchen utensils. But when I walked into the living room, he was still there, sitting cross-legged on the floor, quietly fixing one of our wobbly dining chairs with nothing but a screwdriver he'd found in the utility drawer. "You didn't have to do that," I said, still groggy. He looked up, his storm gray eyes softer in daylight. "Figured it was the least I could do, seeing as you let me stay." There was no sarcasm, no defensiveness, just gratitude. Over the next few days, Luke settled into the apartment as though he had always been there, though he kept his distance, never assuming too much. He offered to cook simple meals, eggs, pasta, sandwiches, and insisted on taking out the trash, cleaning the windows, even fixing the loose cabinet hinge my mom had been nagging me about for months. Mom remained frosty, speaking to him only when absolutely necessary, and usually with a sharp edge to her tone. I could see the weight of her judgment pressing down on him, yet he stayed polite, calm, almost humble. I noticed small things, how he always waited until Mom had left the kitchen before grabbing a glass of water, how he quietly repaired the broken laundry line on our balcony and then walked away without asking for thanks. One evening, I came home exhausted from a double shift, my legs aching so badly I thought I might cry. I barely made it to the couch before my calf seized in a vicious cramp. "Ow! Ow! Oh my God, it hurts!" Luke rushed over. "Where is it?" "My leg, left calf," I hissed through clenched teeth. Without hesitation, he knelt and gently took my foot in his hands. His fingers were warm, surprisingly gentle as they massaged the tight muscle. The pain eased, replaced by a strange warmth that had nothing to do with the massage itself. "You should drink more water," he said softly. "Dehydration does this sometimes." I managed a weak laugh. "Thanks, doctor." He smiled at that, really smiled, and something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the intimacy of the moment. Maybe it was the way his eyes softened when he looked at me. I didn't pull away when his hand slid up to my knee, then to my cheek, brushing away a loose strand of hair. "Haley," he whispered, as though unsure if he had the right to say my name like that. My heart pounded. "Luke?" The kiss happened naturally, tender and slow, tasting of surprise and something like hope. When it ended, I couldn't stop the quiet laugh that bubbled up in my throat, half disbelief, half relief. "I thought this was pretend," I whispered. He looked into my eyes, vulnerable and raw. "Yeah, so did I." I didn't sleep much that night, but not because of regret. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't carrying everything alone. And that scared me, because feelings like this had a way of changing everything. At first, I thought maybe Mom would soften over time, that seeing Luke help around the house would melt some of her resentment. I was wrong. Every meal felt like a silent battle, She'd glance at him over her cup of coffee with those sharp, measuring eyes, then glance at me as if to say, "You're better than this." One morning, she didn't even bother whispering. "Haley, what exactly is your plan here? You think this stray is going to give you a future?" Luke froze mid-bite, eyes on his plate. "Mom, please," I started. "No, I'm serious," she cut me off. "You bring home a man you barely know, pretend he's your fiancé. Yes, I heard you whispering about that ridiculous little act. And for what? To spite me? To prove you can make your own bad choices." "Patricia," Luke said quietly, voice low but steady, "I never wanted to deceive you. She just offered me help, and I accepted. That's all." Mom crossed her arms, unimpressed. "You should have left after the first night." I pushed back from the table, furious. "Mom, stop. You don't even know him. He's been nothing but kind, and you act like he's dangerous." "Kind," she scoffed. "He's a homeless drifter, Haley. Kind doesn't pay bills. Kind doesn't build a future." Luke quietly stood up, collected his plate, and took it to the sink. He didn't argue. He never did. That somehow made it worse. By the end of the week, Mom's patience snapped entirely. While I was working an overnight shift at the hospital, she cornered Luke in the living room. "I'm going to be honest, Luke," she said, her voice icy. "Haley is a sweet girl, but she's reckless and she's using you. She has a real fiancé, someone who's out of town on business. You're just a distraction for her while he's gone." Luke stared at her, shocked, his hands trembling slightly. "That's not true. Believe what you want, but when that man comes back, you'll be out of here. If you're smart, you'll leave now and save yourself the humiliation." The words cut deeper than she probably expected. Luke's face fell, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw a raw kind of pain in his eyes, like he'd been reminded of every time life had told him he wasn't enough. He grabbed his backpack, the one he'd barely unpacked, and left without a word. I didn't know any of this until I came home the next morning. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, and his corner of the living room was empty. I checked the bathroom, the balcony, even the laundry room. Nothing. "Mom, where's Luke?" My voice trembled. She didn't even look up from her tea. "He left. Said it was time to move on." I froze, staring at her, feeling the first sharp crack run through the fragile happiness I'd been holding on to. Somewhere deep inside, I already knew this wasn't the whole story, but I couldn't bring myself to ask. Not yet. The hours after Luke left blurred into days, then into weeks. I tried searching for him, checking the metro station where we first met, asking around at shelters, even scanning the parks where I knew people without homes sometimes gathered. But Luke was gone, like he'd been swallowed by the city. The emptiness he left behind hit harder than I ever imagined. I barely slept, and when I did, I woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there. At work, I plastered on a smile for patience, but inside I felt hollow, broken. And then came the morning when I couldn't stop throwing up. At first, I blamed stress, maybe some bad cafeteria food. But the nausea didn't stop. My hands shook as I picked up a pregnancy test on my way home, half convinced I was overreacting. I wasn't. The little blue line appeared almost instantly. I sank onto the cold bathroom tile, the stick trembling in my hands, my heart hammering so loud it felt like it might crack my ribs. Pregnant. For several minutes, I couldn't breathe. Luke was gone, and now I was carrying his child. It felt unreal, like something happening to someone else. How am I supposed to do this alone? For one brief, awful moment, I considered not keeping it. A single appointment could erase everything. The fear, the uncertainty, the whispers from my coworkers who already loved to gossip about my homeless boyfriend. I even went as far as scheduling the appointment. But sitting there in the clinic, lying back in the chair, staring at the harsh white lights above me, I froze. A sudden thought slammed into me with the force of a freight train. This is Luke's child. This is his piece of me, of us. If I end this now, what will I have left? Tears spilled down my temples. I sat up so fast the nurse startled. "I can't do this," I whispered, grabbing my coat. "I'm keeping the baby." Outside, the air felt sharp and clean, as if I'd stepped into a new world. Terrifying, yes, but mine. When I told Mom, she went silent. Then her face hardened in that way I'd seen all my life whenever she thought I'd made a mistake. "So now you're pregnant," she said flatly, "by a man who abandoned you." "He didn't abandon me," I snapped. "You scared him away." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for days after that, the apartment felt like a war zone. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was sharp, cutting words that left me raw. Still, when I was alone, lying in bed with my hand on my stomach, I whispered to the tiny life growing inside me, "You're not a mistake. You're the best decision I'll ever make." But the loneliness didn't go away, and every night I wondered, "Where are you, Luke? Do you even know what we lost?" Weeks turned into months, and my pregnancy became impossible to hide. The morning sickness faded, replaced by a small but undeniable bump that stretched my scrubs tighter with each shift. I thought Mom might soften once she saw me carrying her grandchild, but instead her silence became heavier. We passed each other in the apartment like strangers. She avoided my eyes, muttered short answers, and retreated into her room with the television volume turned up too loud. I told myself I didn't care, but I did. Every night, I lay awake with my hand on my stomach, wishing Luke was there, wishing Mom would just hold me and say everything would be okay. One rainy afternoon, I decided to clean the windows in my room, hoping the physical work would quiet my restless thoughts. I climbed onto the small stool, stretching to reach the top corner of the glass. I didn't even hear Mom come in until she gasped behind me, "Haley, what are you doing? Get down." I turned, startled. "I'm just cleaning the window." Her face was pale, hands trembling as she rushed forward and grabbed my arm. "Don't you ever do that again." "I thought you were." Her voice cracked. "I thought you were trying to jump." I froze, the weight of her words sinking in. "What? No, Mom. I'd never." Tears filled her eyes, and suddenly she was hugging me, clinging like she hadn't since I was a child. "I'm sorry, Haley. I'm so sorry. I lied to him. I told Luke you had another man. Someone better, someone real. I thought I was protecting you, but I just wanted you to have a safe life, not one like mine." I stiffened. "You told him that?" My voice was barely above a whisper. She nodded, sobbing now. "I thought he'd leave quietly and you'd forget him. But I didn't know you loved him. I didn't know you'd—" Her eyes dropped to my stomach, then back to my face. "I didn't know it would cost you this much." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Anger burned in my chest, hot and sharp. But it collided with something softer. A daughter who had spent years watching her mother break her back to provide, who had listened to her cry quietly at night after bills piled too high. I wrapped my arms around her and whispered, "I'm mad at you, but I don't want to hate you. I can't do this alone, Mom." She held me tighter, shaking her head. "You're not alone anymore. I'll help you with this baby. I'll help you find him if you want. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Something inside me unclenched. For the first time in months, I felt like I had family again. That night, for the first time since Luke left, I slept deeply, dreaming not of loss, but of possibility. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, one of those warm Texas days when the air feels heavy but full of life. I had just come back from a prenatal checkup, carrying a bag of groceries and humming softly to myself, something I hadn't done in months. Then I saw them, a sleek black SUV, followed by two more behind it, rolled to a stop in front of our apartment building. For a second, I thought maybe one of the neighbors had visitors. But then the rear door of the first SUV opened, and Luke stepped out. Only it wasn't the same Luke I'd met at the metro station. This Luke wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, and polished shoes that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His hair was trimmed, his face clean-shaven, and standing behind him were two men in dark sunglasses, bodyguards by the look of them. I froze, groceries dangling from my hands. Luke! His eyes lit up when he saw me, but also carried something deeper, something almost nervous. Haley, I came back for you. I stared at him, heart pounding. For me? You disappeared. You left without a word. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I know. I made a mistake, and I need to explain. I'm not who you think I am. My name is Luke Bennett, son of Thomas Bennett. Maybe you've heard of him. He owns Bennett Logistics and half the trucking companies in Hill Country. My grip on the grocery bag tightened until the plastic stretched thin. So you're rich? You mean to tell me you were never homeless? His shoulders dropped. I walked out of my father's home after a fight with my stepmother and refused to take a penny from him. I wanted to feel what life was like without privilege to prove I could survive on my own. But then I met you and everything changed. You were the first person who saw me, not my family name. I laughed bitterly, tears pricking my eyes. You left me, Luke. You let me think I wasn't enough, that I'd imagined everything between us. And now you show up in a suit, like some knight on a white horse, expecting what? Gratitude. He flinched at my tone, taking another step closer. No, I expect nothing. I just want a chance to explain, to make it right. Please, Haley, I love you. Anger and heartbreak twisted inside me. All those lonely nights, all those whispered words to the baby in my belly, and he had been living a life of comfort while I fell apart. Without thinking, my hand lashed out, striking his cheek in a sharp, echoing slap. He didn't react, didn't raise a hand to stop me. He just stood there, stunned, eyes wide with pain that had nothing to do with the slap itself. Get out, I whispered, voice shaking. Just get out. I didn't wait to see his reaction. I walked past him, groceries clutched tight, and slammed the apartment door behind me, my chest heaving as the first tears spilled free. For days after that confrontation, I shut myself away. I couldn't stop replaying Luke's face in my mind. The shock, the hurt, the way he didn't even try to defend himself when I slapped him. Part of me wanted to forget him all over again, to bury every memory deep and keep surviving like I had been. But another part whispered he came back. Mom noticed my silence. One evening, she set down her cup of tea and said softly, Haley, I need to tell you something. I went to see the Bennetts. My head snapped up. You what? I went to explain everything. That it was my fault Luke left. That I lied to him and pushed him out of your life. Her voice trembled. I told his father, Thomas Bennett, the truth. And do you know what he said? He said his son has been miserable without you. I swallowed hard. So what? He still left me. Mom reached across the table and took my hand, her eyes glossy. Haley! Sometimes people run not because they don't love us, but because they think they're not enough. That boy grew up with money but no love, and he thought he was doing you a favor by staying away. Her words gnawed at me long after she went to bed. The next afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Haley, it's Thomas Bennett. I blinked. Luke's father. Yes, I don't usually meddle in my son's personal life, but after meeting your mother and hearing what happened, I had to call. You should know he's not himself. He's been trying to figure out how to earn your trust back, but he's terrified you'll shut him out. I didn't know what to say. Thomas continued gently. Haley, if you loved him once, talk to him. At least hear him out. Don't let pride destroy something real. That night, I lay awake with my hands on my belly, feeling the soft kicks of the tiny life inside me. This is his child too, I thought. What if we really could be a family? The next morning, I sent Luke a simple text. We need to talk. He replied almost instantly, name the time and place. I'll be there. I chose a quiet cafe downtown, away from the stares and whispers. When I walked in, he was already there, wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt instead of the expensive suit. No bodyguards this time. Just Luke. Hi, he said softly. almost like he was afraid I'd disappear again. I sat down across from him, my heart pounding. "I'm still angry," I admitted, "but I'm willing to hear you out." Relief washed over his face, and for the first time I saw the man I'd met in that metro station, the one who'd been vulnerable, raw, and human. "Thank you, Haley," he whispered. "You won't regret this." And for the first time in a long time, I wanted to believe him. We agreed to meet again 2 days later, just to talk. But life had other plans. That morning started with a sharp pain low in my stomach, sudden and deep enough to make me gasp. At first, I brushed it off as normal pregnancy discomfort, but then the pain sharpened, followed by something far worse. A worm trickled down my leg. When I looked down and saw blood, panic froze me in place. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911, my voice trembling as I explained I was pregnant and bleeding. The next minutes blurred. Paramedics arriving, neighbors staring, the rush of the ambulance. I clutched my stomach and whispered, "Please hold on, baby, please." When the ER doors swung open, Luke was already there. I don't know how he knew. Maybe Thomas told him, maybe Mom, maybe fate itself, but he was there, running toward me, eyes wide with fear. "Haley!" His voice cracked as he took my hand. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere, okay? Just breathe." I wanted to be angry, wanted to tell him this wasn't his problem anymore, but when his fingers closed around mine, I felt safe for the first time in months. Doctors moved fast, ordering ultrasounds and blood work. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my body trembling. Luke sitting beside me, whispering to the baby like he could will it to stay. "Hey, little one," he murmured, resting his palm gently on my belly. "It's your dad. I know I messed up, but I'm here now. You hang in there for your mom and me, okay? We're waiting for you." Tears streamed down my face as I watched him. This man who had once been a stranger on the street, now holding my future like it was sacred. Hours later, the doctor returned with cautious optimism. "The bleeding has stopped for now. The baby's heart rate is strong, but you need to rest and avoid stress." I laughed bitterly. Avoid stress? Easier said than done. Luke squeezed my hand. "We'll figure it out. Together." I turned my head toward him. "You left, Luke. You believed lies about me and walked away." His eyes filled with regret. "I know, and I hate myself for it. I thought you deserved better than a guy who couldn't even hold his life together. But when I lost you, Haley, I realized I'd thrown away the best thing I ever had. Please let me be here now. Let me make this right." I closed my eyes, tears slipping past. Part of me wanted to keep my walls up, to punish him just a little longer. But lying there, holding his hand while our baby kicked faintly under my palm, I realized I didn't want to fight anymore. "Okay," I whispered. "One step at a time." His shoulders sagged with relief, and he kissed my forehead gently. "That's all I'm asking for." And for the first time in months, I felt hope blooming again, fragile but real. Recovery forced me to slow down. I took leave from the clinic, spending my days propped up on the couch, surrounded by pillows and prenatal vitamins. Mom hovered constantly, cooking soups and fussing over my hydration. Luke, true to his word, never left my side. He moved me into his family's ranch estate just outside Austin so I could heal without worrying about bills or stairs. I resisted at first. I wasn't used to such luxury, wasn't sure I belonged in a house with wide porches, stables, and a guest wing bigger than my entire apartment. But Luke said softly, "It's not about the house, Haley, it's about us. I want you safe. I want our baby safe." Mom slowly came around too. One afternoon, I found her laughing with Thomas Bennett in the sunlit kitchen as if they'd known each other for years. She even admitted she'd misjudged Luke. "You picked a good one, honey," she whispered when we were alone. "He's nothing like I thought, and I'm sorry for everything." Weeks passed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were building something, like we were actually a family. Luke set up a nursery himself, determined to assemble every piece of furniture without outside help. "I'm not letting anyone else screw up my kid's crib," he joked. sweat beading on his forehead as he tightened bolts. One afternoon, my doctor scheduled a detailed ultrasound to check the baby's development after the scare. Luke insisted on coming, holding my hand through the gel and cold wand. The technician smiled. "Do you want to know the gender?" I nodded eagerly, and Luke grinned nervously. "Congratulations," she said, her voice light. "You're having a boy and a girl." We both blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" I said, sitting up too fast. The technician chuckled. "Twins. Everything looks healthy, and both heartbeats are strong." I burst into tears, laughing through them. Luke's eyes widened, then softened as he leaned close, kissing my forehead. "Two babies. Haley, do you realize what this means? Twice the diapers, twice the chaos, twice the love." On the drive home, he couldn't stop grinning. "I always wanted a big family, but I didn't think we'd start this big." Mom cried when she heard the news, then immediately began sewing tiny clothes from soft fabrics she'd kept for decades. "These little ones will know how much they were wanted," she said, folding the tiny shirts with care. Thomas ordered an entire second crib before dinner. "Grandchildren," he said proudly, shaking his head. "Plural. Guess I'll have to build that playset sooner than planned." Every evening became a ritual. Mom humming old lullabies while knitting, Luke reading baby books aloud, and me watching the two of them with my hands on my growing belly. I hadn't expected this, hadn't expected joy to creep back into my life so fully. I found myself whispering to the babies, "You saved me, both of you. You gave me a reason to believe in love again." For the first time since everything fell apart, I could see a future not built on fear or loneliness, but on healing, second chances, and a family that finally felt whole. The day our twins were born felt like stepping into sunlight after years of rain. The delivery was long, exhausting, and terrifying at moments, but when I finally heard two strong cries fill the room, every fear I had ever carried fell away. One was a girl, tiny but fierce, her hands already reaching like she owned the world. The other was a boy, calmer, blinking at the light as if he already understood how precious it was. Luke held them both, one in each arm, tears streaking down his face as he whispered, "Welcome home, little ones." Mom stood at the foot of the bed, her hands clasped to her mouth, eyes shimmering. She had been there through every contraction, holding my hand, whispering encouragement, apologizing all over again for the pain her words had caused months earlier. Now she reached for her granddaughter, cradling her gently, while Luke placed our son in my arms. Looking at them, my mother's eyes soft for the first time in years, Luke's strong hands trembling as he kissed his children's foreheads, I realized something. I had once thought I'd lost everything: love, family, safety, even hope. But life had been quietly stitching something new behind the scenes, something stronger than what I'd imagined before. When we brought the twins home, the ranch felt different. Luke had decorated the nursery with murals of bluebonnets and Texas wildflowers, and Mom had filled drawers with hand-sewn clothes, each tiny stitch carrying her way of saying I'm sorry and I'm here. Thomas Bennett had even surprised us by converting an old barn into a playroom for his grandbabies. That first night, with the twins sleeping side by side and the house finally quiet, Luke and I stood in the doorway, arms around each other. "You know," I whispered, "I thought bringing you home that night was the craziest thing I'd ever done." He kissed my temple and smiled. It was also the best. I rested my head on his chest, listening to the slow beat of his heart. We almost lost everything because of pride and fear. I don't ever want to live like that again. He tightened his arms around me. "We won't. From now on, no running, no secrets, just us and our family." I believed him. Months later, when I rocked my babies to sleep, I often thought back to that metro station, to the broken man holding a paper cup, and to the reckless nurse who decided to take him home. I thought about how pain had turned into love, how mistakes had turned into lessons, and how healing had found its way to us even when we didn't deserve it. And every time I whispered to my children, "You were with every tear, every fight, every sleepless night," I felt something deep and unshakable settle inside me: peace. Life had given me detours I never expected. But maybe that's how we find where we truly belong, not through perfect plans, but through the broken roads that lead US home.